Hello and howdy, folks. Welcome to the first match of the King's Cup Invitational Tournament number 2. I'm sure all of you have probably seen my many promotions of this event in the previous week up until now, but it's finally happening. We're finally here on the first match, and if you haven't seen it already in the title of the video, we have two commands here for this stream. We have !deck lists, and this will give you a link to the Google Drive that has all of our competitors' decks, not just for today, but also for our games tomorrow. So there's 20 decks in there total. And there is !giveaway, which will enter your name into the Twitch giveaway, and that's how I'm going to be picking who wins the giveaways, and the giveaways are of gold. So you can be using this gold on packs, officer packs, draft, blitz tournament, gold cards, whatever you want, you could spend the gold on. So be sure to enter into that giveaway. You can do that now, and you will be in the giveaway for the rest of the stream. You only have to type it once, and you will be in the giveaway until the very end of the stream. And we will be drawing those people as we go through the stream. Now, let's quickly go over let's do an overview of the event. I've spoken about this already in a video, but let's sort of go back over the event just in case there's going to be new people here. There's going to be people who might have forgotten. Because this is not your normal cards tournament. This is not just your best of 3 standard decks who wins on Jaguar, twice in a row wins the event. This is going to be an absolute slog. So, this is a 3-week round robin. We have 4 players, and they will all get a chance to play each other in a best of 7. So each week, they are going to bring 5 decks and get 1 ban, open deckless tournament, except in the finals, which will be a best of 9, because after the 3 weeks, the top 2 players, after the 3 weeks round robin, will play each other in the finals, the winner getting a $50 cash prize. And on top of that, every single week has a brand new format that is going to require brand new decks, so they're going to have to think about their lineup every single week. This isn't just going to be simply a matter of hard targeting what the other person brought or copying what the other person brought. It is going to be an absolute slog. You have to try your hardest throughout the entire thing, and we'll get into this much later at the end of the actual games, but the way the scoring system here works to keep track of who's winning and losing as we go through the 3 weeks is not just simply who has the most wins. It's not just going to be simply a tally of 0, 1, 2, or 3 based on the number of matches they won, but rather it's going to be their win-loss difference. So they're going to try to have to win as many games as possible, not just the matches. So even if they have a bad deck that can't win, they should still try to get their wins on all of the other decks to best maximize their points to stay in the running for that final position. Now, what is the deck building rule? So again, this changes every single week, and the rule that is across all weeks is no cards are allowed in multiple decks in your lineup. So this does not mean that it's a singleton deck. You can run multiple copies of cards in your deck, but you can't run the same card in multiple decks. So then what that means is you can play Japan-Germany and run 15th Cavalry Regiment and 35T, but you can't then build a Germany-Japan that also runs 15th Cavalry and 35T. You might be able to build a Germany-Japan, say, Control with discard elements that don't run any of the same cards, and you can even bring multiple copies of the same deck, which some of our players have done here today, so long as it does not run any unique cards that are run in the other deck, including elites. So you can bring multiple British decks, but you can't have Monty in all of your British decks. And we will see. A player here has brought multiple British decks, so that's going to be pretty exciting. And the format for this week, on top of that, so the previous rule is across all of the events, but the format for this week is Classic Mode. So this means reserved cards are allowed. It's every single card that has ever been printed in its current format in the game, any deck with this deck restriction. So we are going to see some absolutely wild decks. If you're new to cards, you might be seeing cards you've never even seen before. And the power level of these decks is going to be incredibly high. However, it also means that they're not just going to simply be bringing, 5 of the #1 meta decks right now, because who plays a lot of Classic Mode? That's not a lot of people play Classic mode. There's not really a defined meta, so they're going to be bringing some improved versions of existing decks. They're going to be bringing some old decks, and in some cases, they're going to be building new decks, combining both rotated cards and newer cards that have never really coexisted together in the standard format. So, that is the overview of the tournament here and what we're going to be doing here today. But today we are going to be having the players Berto Burrito match up against Innocent Bubbles. So let's take a look at their player cards and get to learn a little bit more about both of these players. So first up, we have Berto Burrito, and we have this is a sort of a snapshot of his tournament experience in cards, specifically looking at the OCC as sort of the main metric, because that's the longest tournament that has existed in cards. It's the tournament that has had the most iterations in cards every single month dating back to June 2020. So Berto Burrito, across all of those OCCs, and this is counting clashes as well as ultimates, he has appeared in 18 OCCs, and in the OCCs he has not appeared in himself as a player, he has cast a lot of those as well. So even if he's not directly playing in the tournaments, he is still very much engaged in the competitive scene of cards, so he's an absolute beast. His best OCC result is winning the entire thing. First place, he has won 2 different OCCs, as well as a 3rd place in the 2022 World Championship. And his OCC game win rate, so this is the win rate not of his games on ladder, this is his win rate against top tournament players in OCCs across all of his 18 appearances, is a 56%. Now, this number is a number you have not seen before, because the numbers that are shown in the regular OCC streams is your total win rate on ladder for that month. And there, where you're playing against players from all skill levels, playing all sorts of different decks, it's really easy to get up into the 70s or even the 80s% win rate. But here, anything above 50% is absolutely insane, because that means you are winning more than losing against the top of the top in cards. Now, his total earnings across all of these cards tournaments, largely off of his OCCs, but there's also an open appearance as well as his 3rd place in World Championships, he has earned 4,800 USD, and he is hoping to win another 50 on top of that if he can win this tournament. But what sort of decks does Berto like? Well, Berto's favorite nation is Soviets, and for his favorite deck, he said Soviet self-damage. And I know that this was probably a hard toss-up for him to decide between Soviet self-damage and Soviet artillery. The very aggressive artillery deck that is a bit older and quite nerfed, and we're probably not going to be seeing any of it in this tournament, unfortunately. But I know those are his 2 favorite decks of all time, and it was probably a coin toss between those 2. But that definitely solidifies his favorite nation being Soviets. He absolutely loves this, and it's going to be funny once we get to deck lists, because you might notice something a little bit missing from his current or the decks he submitted to this tournament. But who is going to be his competitor? Well, it is none other than Innocent Bubbles himself. Again, cards content creator, cards competitive player, and cards caster. Similarly to Berto, he has been around cards for a very long time, making his way into 10 OCC appearances, but again, also casted probably, or certainly more than even Berto himself in OCCs. Innocent Bubbles has been engaged in cards esports since the very beginning, and his best result is 1st place, although it's only 1, but it is more recent than Berto Burrito's 2 OCC victories, so, it's not just quantity. There's also recency is a good evaluation of how tested these players are. And his OCC game win rate is a flat 50%. And again, 50%, it's 50-50, it seems normal, but that is going even against players the likes of, say, Noen or Tang Tang, these players who grind the game like hundreds of games a month, every single month. Bubbles, who has made his way into less than a quarter of total OCCs, is still keeping even with these players. So that's quite impressive. And now his total earnings in cards is a 1,800 USD, so again, quite a bit, but he will also be likely to add to that in this tournament. His favorite nation is Italy. So I said you could do any nations, doesn't have to be main nation, and he immediately went for Italy, with his favorite deck being L640 aggro. So utilizing the 0 operation cost 1-drop Italian tank to just pressure out your opponent as quickly as possible. It's sort of the original combined arms deck of just hot aggro cheese. And, that's his favorite deck. Did he bring that deck to this tournament? We will have to see. L640 did eat some nerfs. But that also shows that Innocent Bubbles is not your standard cards player where Berto Burrito might favor certain control decks and a much sort of more standard lineup approach, a more tried and true tested lineup approach. Bubbles does like himself just some decks that could do some crazy things, decks that might be a little less tested, but not necessarily worse. So once we get into their lineups, we will see how that's going to be going. But before we get to the decks, let's quickly pull our first giveaway. So again, we'll wait like a minute or two, but exclamation mark giveaway to enter the giveaway. You only have to type it once. And I'll also do a shout out now that the more people have shown up. You can do exclamation mark deck lists to see all of the decks brought by these players today, as well as the players who will be playing tomorrow, Kill Switch and Baron. So we'll let a few more people enter that giveaway. The current entries list is just 16 people, which is less than half of the people currently watching the stream. So if you want to enter the giveaway, again, you could enter it now. And if you don't get a chance to enter immediately, that's okay. You will be able to enter the giveaway at any point over the entire stream. You only have to type it once, though, to get in. So let's draw an entrant. And the winner of the first giveaway is none other than Gatto. So, Gatto, you have won the giveaway. I will be sending all of the codes after the stream, just because I am running everything here, so it's a bit complicated to try to DM Twitch codes, or cards codes while running the Twitch stream, and, cast through the whole thing. But I will also do a quick shout out of, if you are entering the giveaway, make absolute certain that your Twitch whispers are open, because that is how I'm going to be reaching out to you. If your privacy settings say Twitch whispers are off, I will not be able to send you your prize, so that's going to suck. So again, if you're entering the giveaway, just make sure, DMing Bubbles asking him where the hell he is, yes. So make sure your Twitch whispers are open, because that is going to be very important to actually receive your giveaway. Again, I will hand out all of the codes for the winners at the end of the stream, so don't freak out if I don't send them to you immediately. You have not been forgotten. But now, we've seen the players. We've seen the format that these players are going to be playing in. Let's now take a look at their decks. So we will start off by taking a look at the decks of none other than Berto Burrito himself. What decks did he bring? And again, you can't bring cards in multiple decks, and it's classic. Anything is allowed, including multiple nations. Well, we have Berto's first deck here, which is a German-France quasi-control. It's a very discard-heavy deck. So you can see there's sort of the classic discard cards, Wolf Packs, you've got the Annihilations, the Hippo to deny a draw, as well as some of the rotated discard package, like the U16, the countermeasure that when your opponent plays an order, it discards a random card from their hand, as well as the newly sort of updated Sabotage, which is choose one of 3 cards in their hand to discard and add a copy of it to your own hand. So Berto's got a bunch of this discard, but if you actually look at the curve of the list, it's very, very it's very, very small. Like, the curve is very front-centered, and this is because, well, when you're playing a deck like Discard, you know that in the long game, you'll be able to discard or steal most of your opponent's threats, but if you're playing against an aggressive deck that just empties its hand by turn 4, suddenly playing Wolfpack or an Annihilation on a cavalry regiment while your opponent has 4 other units on board, well, that's gonna suck. So you have the AoEs in here, like the root out the enemy. You can see the cards with the sort of the crest next to them are cards that are not in standard rotation. So, of course, to root out the enemy, that was rotated a while ago, but it's a good German solid AoE. Jägerbomber rotated out more recently. And then for the actual win condition of the deck, once your opponent, you discard most of their threats, of course, you're winning with the classic German elites, the likes of Leopold, Comet for just infinite value, Jägerbomber for some big tempo plays, and then you have some French cards for the guard, and I have to say, I really like this choice by Berto to not go too greedy in on the Sabotages. Like, he could have put in another 2 Sabotages and just made the deck, like, search up discard and put in everything, but he doesn't need that. He's already running sort of more tempo-oriented cards like Annihilation, rather than these super greedy cards like Sabotage. So you can see, even though German France discard on paper, this is a very spicy deck. This is a deck that hasn't really existed before. He's taken a lot of risks here. It's something he has not, been grinding for months. On the other hand, it is a very, very well thought out plan, a very well thought out deck. This is not simply just throwing a random deck together. Now, his second deck here is Japan German Aggro, which, very classic deck. And with access to cards in Reserved, you get the likes of Bicycle Regiment for an additional Blitz unit. You get the 2-cost Aichi for just a hugely sticky unit that's incredibly frustrating for many decks to deal with. You get the Befelswagen back, so now you get Yokosuka and Befelswagen to be even more likely to pull that Befelswagen out of your hand on turn 1, the good old Beef Wagon, as it is more commonly known. Dina for more card draw, Naval Supply Run for a finisher, but if you notice, he runs Erados, but there's a certain card missing from this lineup, and that is Feigned Retreat. So Feigned Retreat, sort of like the face of Jagro for several years, it got sent to the reserve pool. Berto Burrito is choosing not to run that. Now he's running all of the your normal Jagro units. It's a very Jagro, standard Jagro deck, and he runs the Erados, but rather than Feigned Retreat, he is running more board-centric cards like the Naval Supply Run to just buff up his units, but he's also got a very interesting Suppress package. So the newly changed Suppress card, or Suppression, which is a 1-credit German order. If you control an air unit, or suppress a enemy unit, if you control an air unit, also draw a card. So this is going to be able to get through guard. It's going to be able to shut down healing like the Engineers Regiment or Honeys. And it's going to help him sort of find that value he might otherwise be missing. And then he's relying on the 4 expansion. And of course the suppression, which will draw him cards as well. But he has the Erados, the 4 expansion, the Dina, and this is going to be sort of the central card draw. So reserved classic Jagro not running Feigned. That's a very interesting choice, and we will see if this is going to work out great for him, if Feigned is a bait, or if this will come back and he'll regret this. So now we take a look at his third deck, and this is another very spicy control deck. We see Berto leaning on the slower ends of decks so far, but this is a Britain-Poland Legions control deck with a couple of very fun packages thrown in here. So, of course, you just have the very standard British Elite package. You got the Churchills, the Wave After Wave, the Wellingtons, and then you have the rotated cards. And you see, there's only 4 rotated cards in this deck, which is puny. Like, this is basically a standard deck. So you might be thinking, well, why is he playing basically a standard deck? It's Britain. Well, if you look at the cards he is running that were reserved, you have 2 Seaforth Highlanders, Shelling, and Monty. These are 4 of arguably the strongest cards ever printed. Or, well, 3 of the strongest cards ever printed. Like, if you had to ask somebody what's the top 5 British cards to ever exist, those 3 are almost certainly on it. And if you ask them what's the top 10 cards to ever exist across the game, there's a good chance all 3 of those get on there. So it's few but very powerful cards from the classic format, and then this is going to have synergy, some potentially very crazy synergy with the newly changed Cromwell. So the Cromwell now has Guard. It's a 4-cost 3/5 heavy armor Guard, and whenever you pin an enemy unit, also suppress it, which means you play Cromwell Monty, and Monty becomes 1 credit, pin all enemy units, and suppress all enemy units, and draw a card. That's absolutely insane. And of course, Shelling doing something very similar. And this is absolutely crazy. This gives him access to suppress that Britain normally doesn't really have access to. You can see there's some other pin cards in there for the Cromwell synergy, like the Enemy Contact. And then he also has a very, very fun Commandos sub-theme that I'm a huge fan of in most British control decks, and that's with the Resourcefulness. So the Resourcefulness actually has a double synergy. 1, it's going to act as an intel card to buff the legions to trigger Tired Out to draw cards, but then it also draws a commando from your deck, and this deck has 4 commando units in it. It has 2 copies of the number 9 commando, which is the 1/1 that sets an enemy's defense of an enemy unit to 1, and the Devil's Brigade, which is the 3/3 blitz that lets you ping off a unit, particularly one that you just set its HQ to 1. So these cards have synergy together. This lets you fish them out of the deck. They're also great against Jagro. The number 9s are great against control to get through huge units. And then you also have a copy of the Baker Street Irregulars, which lets you develop another British order if you control a commando. So this is just going to be another way to generate situational value that lets you be somewhat more reactive to the board. And then, of course, there is a bit of a draw denial sub-theme in this deck with MI5 to deny your opponent a draw and punish to discard your opponent's cards. So this is a very, very just well-rounded synergistic deck. We will see if a very, very synergistic deck with good cards is able to compete with decks that might be a bit more dedicated into a single theme. We will have to see. And then we have his fourth deck here, which if people have been playing for a while, they might recognize, just based on the nation combination. It is a US-Soviet ramp deck. And if you look at what cards they're running, that Berto is running here, that have been reserved, well, it's most of the Soviet cards. You have 3 copies of Mobile Defense, 3 copies of Scorched Earth, 3 copies of Spy Ring. It is good old research ramp. So essentially how this deck works is rather than relying on the huge units that you might see in a more standard US-Britain ramp or sort of the more greedy side US-German ramps, this deck runs very few big units. It's largely based on ramp, stall with the form of Scorched Earth and the mobile defenses, slow down the opponent, and then you win with huge plays off the Spy Ring, because the Spy Ring is going to give you access to really just reactive cards to what your opponent is doing. If they're an aggressive deck, you can play them at 3 for healing, for removal, for protection, Smokescreen HQ to let you draw into your AoEs, and if you're playing against control, you just simply start dropping nukes on your opponent over and over, and that was just how the deck existed before. This was a tournament-worthy deck in the past, and it now has the added addition of Production Order, 2 copies, for the B-24Ds and the B-24Js. You have Bomber Mafias for an additional AoE that was previously lacking for Soviet-US, or US-Soviet, that will also develop into additional bombers, additional B-24s and B-24Js. You have the Firebomb for a great targeted removal as well as potential AoE clear against a deck like Jagro. You have the Costly Victory for additional healing on top of this. And then, of course, you just have all of the normal standard rotated cards, including Seaboard Invasion, which, hasn't been changed in a while, but Seaboard Invasion gives you random US cards, and the pool of units you can pull from Seaboard Invasion has grown. So now you can get things such as, say, Blue and Gray, which will then potentially start generating you even more additional retributions off of the Seaboard Invasion. This deck's value potential is crazy, but the big question is going to be, is Scorched Earth and Mobile Defense and Jasko and Bryansk regiments enough to compete with the likes of, say, something like Feigned Retreat Jagro, which is just going to be non-stop gas trying to run you down before you can get into these researches. And then Berto's last deck, he decided that he doesn't actually want to bring a Soviet deck. He said Soviets is his favorite nation. He said self-damage is his favorite deck. And instead of bringing a Soviet deck, he has opted to bring a second Japanese deck. And this one is Japan-France Resistance. Now, Japan-France Resistance, one of the best decks in the game, and then it got nerfed into the dirt, and then it got nerfed into the dirt a second time, and then all of the Resistance cards, except for Army of the Resistance, got rotated from the game. And you know what? That's just how it was. That's just how it sat. The deck sat around and languished for a while. But you know what people haven't really been trying, because no one really plays Classic Mode that often? Nobody's really been trying the combination of Compromise, Honor and Loyalty, and Resistance, and that is what Berto is doing in this deck. 3 copies of Vive la Resistance, 4 copies of Compromise, 2 copies of Honor and Loyalty, 1 copy of Phony War, 1 copy of Liberation, 1 copy of Army of the Resistance. All of his French cards are built around either forcing the opponent to draw cards or adding resistance cards to the opponent's hand, which you will then play. You will play that first, and then you play Compromise. So currently in the game in Standard, you end your turn on 8 cards in hand, they play Compromise, they force you to draw 2, you draw up to 9, you overdraw a card, then it goes to your turn, and you overdraw a second card. Now, you will do Vive la Resistance Compromise, and then you overdraw 3 cards rather than 2, so it's even additional denial of your own resources, the cards you put in your deck. And if you actually look at what he's winning as his win condition, that's kind of it. There's no Kawanishi Last Rites combo in this deck. There's no Shidens, there's no Kikas. If you look at the big units in this deck, there's a Ki 83 because it forces the opponent to draw. There's a single Winter Regiment, and there's Home Defense to generate a couple units, and that's basically it. Everything else is just removal or guard units. And is that going to be enough? There's a ton of healing in the deck. There's a ton of forced overdraw. On top of that, you have access to Japanese cards that force draw, like Honorable Death, as well as the Rotated Take Initiative, which then adds cards to their hand on top of the resistance cards. So all in all, this deck looks absolutely filthy. I would not be that surprised if this deck eats a nerf. Or sorry, not a nerf. Eats a ban. Because if I'm Innocent Bubbles looking at this deck, I don't want to play against this deck. I don't know if it's good or not, but this just looks like the most horrific experience ever, win or lose, and we are going to be here to see it. Now, what decks does Innocent Bubbles have to play against Berto Burrito? What are his decks that he brought? So again, he's fitting the same restrictions. These players have the access to the same collection. They're both full collection players. Same deck restrictions, but I'm going to tell you now, there is some pretty different decks in here. So let's switch over to the decks of Innocent Bubbles. Okay, here we go. So Innocent Bubbles' first deck here is a Britain-German Air with a countermeasure synergy sub-theme. This deck, I am incredibly excited to see how it works. So you have the normal Brit Air, just standard broken stuff. Most of the stuff was rotated rather than nerfed. And if you look at actually what cards were put in that were rotated, again, there's only 2 unique cards here that were rotated, and one of them's Entrapment. And the other one is Empire Strikes. And Empire Strikes might just flatly be good enough to make Brit Air just a deck worth taking. Empire Strikes is an absolutely insane card, and it was a very good thing that it was rotated and hasn't come back yet. So, you have the Gladiators, the Cast, the Swordfish, the Sea Embargoes, the Sharks, the Parasies, the Albacores, and then all the British Draw, the HMS Illustrious, the Spitfire. That is all standard air stuff that you see on ladder, you queue up right now. Now, what is he running that is not standard air stuff? Well, he has 2 copies of the Suppression. Again, we saw this in Bodo's lineup as well. This deck is running a lot more air units, so it can more regularly get this off. And then he has 2 copies of the Fusilier, which is the 1/3 fighter that at the end of its turn, it activates a countermeasure in your hand. And then he's running 2 copies of the Kermark, which lets you activate a countermeasure in your hand on deployment effect. And then his 6 countermeasures in the deck, there's no Ultra, the 6 countermeasures in the deck, 2 Bridge 2 Fires, 4 Entrapments. So it's max copies of the most expensive countermeasures in the game. It's the only 2 countermeasures that cost 5. A Bridge 2 Fire is going to act as a frontline board clear, which is actually what you want in air. And if the frontline is empty, then it also gives you a 4/5 Blitz tank, so that's additional burn, as well as it's an additional unit to keep your opponent out of the frontline. And the entrapments are going to keep your units alive, so when your opponent finally gets the big Blitz tank to go up and clear off your buffed up bomber, it instead dies to entrapment, and then it buffs your entire board of bombers that they still can't remove. So these 2 countermeasures, it's not just simply a matter of, throw in the big countermeasures and some countermeasure synergy cards that you might think it is when you first look at this deck, but the 2 countermeasures actually have incredible synergy with Brit Air, and he has 2 different ways of triggering it, and that's for cheating it out on top of just holding it up regularly. So we'll see if this works out for him. There is, of course, the danger that he gets these cards in his hand early. He doesn't draw the countermeasure triggering cards, and it just falls apart. But this is a best of 7, so decks aren't as worried about simply getting a bad unlucky hand and then suddenly the entire thing's over because it's a best of 3. He will have chances to keep playing this deck. But what are the other 4 decks that are supporting it? Well, we have a German-Finland Fast Heinz, and if you look, again, at this deck, 2 cards from Reserve Pool. So Innocent Bubbles here is being very, very conservative on what reserve cards he wants to run. And that's just because Innocent Bubbles might just be thinking, well, the cards that have been released more recently are just better than old cards. Obviously, there's a few exceptions, and he is running those exceptions when they come up, but in some cases, they might just not be. And German-Finland is a perfect example of that, where, again, 37 out of 39 cards in this deck are just what you see on ladder. And then the 2 cards that he's running that aren't what you see on ladder is 1 copy of Fast Heinz, which, of course, is just an insanely powerful card, and then 1 copy of the FW Jägerbomber, again, incredible top end for this type of deck, and just a very tempo-focused deck. And then otherwise, he's just running an absolute ton of tank synergy cards, just a ton of tanks, and it's just going to be about building boards after boards after boards, and at any point, his opponent is under the fear that suddenly these boards are going to get buffed up, the operation costs are going to drop to 0, the Panzer Grenadiers will start coming out to buff up the tank attacks, and then you just win out of the blue. Fast Times is going to work towards that strategy as well. So it's going to be very fun to look at this deck in action, but also I think this deck perfectly shows sort of how the deck, you have to think about deck building in this format with these rules, because he likely, we will see, he's bringing a Japan-German aggro, and what's great about German-Finland Heinz is that it doesn't need to run 35Ts, which is being used in the Japan-German deck, and it doesn't need to run 22nd Infantries, which are being run in the Japan-German deck, and it doesn't need to run the Wirbelwinds or the Befehlswagons, which are both being run in the Japan-German deck. So really, it's two very aggressive decks, and Innocent Bubbles might have been purposely wanting to bring a very aggressive lineup rather than going for the more variety of options in a more control, slower-oriented deck. And he found a very good way to bring a series of aggressive cards without, well, getting around that duplicate restriction deck, or the duplicate restriction rule. So then we see that aforementioned Japan-German deck. Of course, he has the new Shibata regiments, as well as just the standard Jaegro stuff, and this deck has a bit more from reserved. Of course, the Wirbelwinds, the Befehlswagons, these are going to be absolutely disgustingly powerful cards. The Marauder, not the Marauder, the Martyr, which unlocks an incredible amount of draw potential in Jaegro, and then a series of elites. He is running a Feigned Retreat list, with Dina, Key 83, Feigned Retreat, the Erados to fish for the Type 94 TKs, so these are going to be giving him the surprise attacks to get through guards, and the Bicycle Regiments, of course, and the Aichis. And if you actually look at the total number of orders he runs in this deck, he has Feigned Retreat and Desperate Measures. It is 2 order Feigned. Not even Bombing Raid, no Aichis in this deck, or Audacities in this deck at all. It is 2 order Feigned, and again, you can see huge differences between this and the Japan-German aggro deck that Berto brought. Again, same restrictions, 2 very different decks. Then we have a Britain-US ramp deck, and again, this is making a lot of use out of many rotated cards. So you have the very, very obvious cards that you would be including back, like the Monty, the Shelling. He has Supply Shortage, Monsoon Rots, so that's going to be, ramping up into those cards. And that's sort of what we saw in the previous expansion before those cards were rotated out, but now he's going to be doing it on top with the help of Monty, Shelling, Seaforth Highlanders, and he's fit Commonwealth back into this. And again, similar to the 2 Berto's ramp deck, this is going to be including the more newly released cards of Production Order and Bomber Mafia. So this is sort of the best of both worlds, an incredibly powerful put-together deck. 3 copies of Lend-Lease to get through his deck, since the 4 copies of Convoy were in the Brit Air deck, since this is his second British deck. And then, last but not least, Innocent Bubbles is bringing none other than Soviet Japan's self-damage. Berto's acclaimed favorite nation, his acclaimed favorite deck. Innocent Bubbles decided, you know what, I'm going to bring it up against him. We'll see how this works out for him, but it's pretty standard self-damage lineup with a few interesting exceptions. So he's running the Zhukov, which was rotated, obviously, and the Ura, and this is going to give self-damage the much-needed ability to finish a game that it's currently lacking in standard rotation, as well as just the absolutely busted Soviet elites of the 1st Rifles and the 39th Rifles. So these 2 cards, elites, if he can find them, are going to give him massive tempo swings and just general board presence that is going to help him with his general strategy. But then on top of that, you have a few interesting exclusions. There's no copies of Stand Together, no copies of Red Banner, so he's not doing any destroy and turn into type of cards in this deck. 2 copies of T-35, and that's going to give him extra procs for the cards like the 456th. 1 sneaky copy of Counteroffensive, which can just end games out of nowhere, and 2 copies of the 60th Cavalry Regiment. And this is a card that only allows players to play 1 order at a time. And this is a card I'm very interested to see how it works out in self-damage, because that's not a card that I've ever seen run in self-damage myself. Because self-damage sometimes is going to want to be playing a lot of orders in the same turn. They're going to be wanting to play Sickles into Winter Warfare, into Red Dawn, into play down a bunch of stuff, Winter Warfare, Counteroffensive. And you can't do that if you have 60th Cavalry on the board. But maybe it's worth shutting down decks, for example, like Berto Burrito's Japan-France Resistance, which is 90% orders. you will just simply play down a couple big units, a 60th Cavalry, and that might just slow down your opponent long enough to win. So this might actually be a very specific meta call-out against his opponent in Berto Burrito. So now we have talked enough about the deck lists, and let's take a look at what decks have been banned. So here are their lineups, and I will tell you right now, this might get a little confusing, but I will tell you right now that the deck that Berto Burrito had banned was his Brit-Poland Legions, so we will not be getting to see the Brit-Poland Legions in action. And the deck that Innocent Bubbles had banned was his Brit-USA ramp. So we will be seeing the Brit-German Air, so again, he has two British decks. It's a little confusing, but his Brit-USA ramp has been banned. And this is very interesting. Both players just straight out banning the sort of the Cromwell-Monty Shelling decks. Both of these players clearly do not want to be playing against Monty, they don't want to be playing against Shelling, and they don't want Monty and Shelling to also be suppressing all of their boards. So this leaves them with the remaining decks, and I will contact the players now, and we will shortly get into the games. So if you bear with me for a moment, and I will also once again remind everybody to enter the giveaway with ! Giveaway. And if you want to see the deck list to follow along as we watch the players here today, then press or type in Twitch chat ! Deck lists. So let us get the games up and running. And this might take a brief second just to get OBS and spectator mode working. Can be a bit of a pain at times. And that is one deck going. We'll see if that gets working, and let's do a quick another giveaway. And the winner of the second giveaway is Conflict of Nations WW15. So you have won the giveaway. Again, I will send you the code at the end of the video, or at the end of the video, at the end of the stream. But you will have to turn your Twitch whispers to be on so that I can send it to you. Just letting the players know that they can get started into their first game. And while we're just sort of sitting here waiting for the games to get started, I want to say, what do you guys predict of this? What do you think? Berto Burrito, Innocent Bubbles, both very, very good players, but who do you think is going to come up ahead? Who do you think is going to be winning based on just their lineups? To me, it seems that Innocent Bubbles has a bit more of an aggressive lineup. Like, I think in terms of what his decks are trying to do, they're better lined up into Berto Burrito. I think he might go under a lot of Berto Burrito's decks. However, I think Berto Burrito might have the slight edge in deck building. So we'll see if his more refined decks can make up for what might be something potentially lacking in sort of the matchups there. All right. Looks like the players are getting into the games. Hopefully spectator mode stays working for us. We can only hope. And here we go. So we're headed into game one, looking at the mulligans, and it's going to be Berto Burrito on his US-Soviet ramp, his US-Soviet research ramp, against Innocent Bubbles on his Britain-German air. So, again, Bubbles is going to be trying to essentially just pressure out his opponent, and Berto Burrito already immediately keeping turn 2 War Machine going first, that's what he wants, and keeping the Scorched Earth, because if he can hit 4 air units with Scorched Earth, then, he is going to be in a very good position. The first few turns pass back very quickly. Innocent Bubbles with a very rough-looking hand. Some of these countermeasures aren't going to be of much use in this matchup. And Berto Burrito going for the Spy Ring, which adds a second U.S. research to his hand. So he's got the double researches going. Meanwhile, over on Innocent Bubbles' side of the board, he is really just sort of sitting there passing back the turn. A mobile defense will make things a little bit difficult. He can drop down one of his 2 Fusiliers. It's guaranteed to activate a bridge too far, and the T-70s will die at the end of the turn. So that does mean that this is guaranteed a 4-5 in the front line. And, Scorched Earth will slow that down, but it's not going to slow it down altogether, and Berto Burrito is still a few turns off of potentially going for this Bomber Mafia. It'll be interesting to see whether he wants to spend one of these researches to gain credits, or if he's going to just start developing that up into the nuclear bombs, because of course, if Berto Burrito can hit nuclear bombs, this game might as well just be over. And now Innocent Bubbles' hand is not looking any better, and actually the activation, of course, I forget, the activation of that actually kills the 3-1 T-70 that would have died anyways, because it triggers at the end of Berto Burrito's turn at the same time as the T-70. So that is a huge, huge loss for Innocent Bubbles. He drops down the second Fusiliers, but there is no countermeasure to trigger it, and even if there was a countermeasure, the entrapment wouldn't be going anyways, so you would need second copy of a Bridge too far for that to do anything. And this close air support doing absolutely nothing. There's no units for suppression to trigger off of. It's just an absolute rough hand for Innocent Bubbles here. Maybe he should have been slightly less aggressive in the mulliganing. But, even if he had a couple 1-drops, Berto Burrito would just drop down one of these 2 Scorched Earths he has, and that would be absolutely terrible. And Berto Burrito is actually just choosing to kill the 1-3 Fusiliers with the pressurized cabin. That's a very interesting choice by him. Innocent Bubbles finally just decided to drop the convoy and get his first British air unit onto the board in the form of an Albacore, and Berto Burrito finds his 3rd Scorched Earth. So, just looking at what's in hand, Berto Burrito, you want to say Berto Burrito's going to win, but it's unclear how. He's certainly not going to be losing anytime soon. But if Bomber Mafia can find him into, say, a Blitz Bomber, then things are probably going to be going quite well. Innocent Bubbles needs to not overcommit into one of these Scorched Earths, but at this point, do you have a different choice? He's going to get to put 4 damage into the HQ here with close air support. And pass back the turn. Hour of Need pickup gives Berto something to do. He could, of course, further develop the research, and that would curve perfectly into going for nukes on the following turn, and, of course, slowing your opponent down to 4 operation cost units on turn 7 means only one of these guys can attack. And Berto does just that. He decides he's going to add the tier 3 research to hand, Scorched Earth all of the units, and I guess you can't really see it here, but those units do have 4 operation cost. But the sea embargo's coming down. And is that going to be a... Oh no, he suppressed his own unit, it looks like. That's very interesting. So he dropped the suppression on his own unit, and that actually reduced its operation cost back to 1, so he could attack with it, and then he buffed it back up with 2 sea embargoes, both giving him Kitty Hawk, and letting him continue to pressure face. And suddenly, if Berto Burrito chooses to just simply add nukes to his hand this turn, he's facing down a lot of damage. And, I mean, he could drop another Scorched Earth, put this guy back up, well, put the Shark back up to 4 operation cost, but that kind of messes with his curve. He's forced to do Scorched Earth. I guess he could Bomber Mafia first into Scorched Earth an Hour of Need, get that going, but you don't necessarily want to be destroying these Scorched Earth units, so he's just going to choose to add the nukes. Top decked Sea Embargo means that this unit will survive through nukes, and if he can pick up a Shark or a 3rd Kitty Hawk, he might just be able to burn Berto Burrito out of the game, because Berto currently has no healing in hand. Empire Strikes comes out to deal 4 damage, the Shark swings face for 4 damage, and Berto Burrito, overdrawing Firebomb, he would have loved to see that. The Bomber Mafia first will let him clear the board, Double Shark will put him down to 1 health, and he does not get any healing option off of the Bomber Mafia, so there goes the board. And Innocent Bubbles wins the game with a Shark top deck. Unfortunately, he does not get it. But, I mean, you can drop Double Kitty Hawk. You might also want to save Double Kitty Hawk, potentially. Just raw holds Entrapment. Doesn't want to overcommit into a second Scorched Earth. Doesn't want to overcommit into another board getting wiped by the nukes. Berto Burrito goes for Spy Ring. Finds Reich's Research. That's not the one he wanted. If he got US Research, his 3rd copy, he could have gained Smokescreen for the turn to get around potentially Blitz Lethals. If he got the British Research, he could use it to heal up off of 3 HQ. But as it stands, he's going to drop the 2nd nuke, and he is in a rough position. He doesn't have the credits. The Super Fortress is doing nothing. And I do have to wonder if things might just come back to the turn where Berto Burrito decided to drop immediately turn 2, tier 2 research to destroy the single unit and add the Super Fortress. Yes, there was a tempo swing, but maybe he should have just continued to ramp and do something else. Maybe that could have put him into a different position. But the 2nd Kitty Hawk will come down, drop Berto Burrito down to 1 health. And, I mean, what can he find? There's the costly victory in his deck to gain HQ, but he at most could heal 2 with that currently. There's 3rd Spy Ring into British Research. Bryansk Irregular's top deck will keep him alive, because it will prevent any of these fighters from hitting the HQ. So he can drop Bryansk, drop Scorched Earth. Maybe he wants to start with the Bomber attack to hit the Kitty Hawk, but maybe he wants to limit the opponent's board space just in case there's a top-decked Wellington. Although Wellington might have been put into the... I believe Wellington was put into the other Innocent Bubbles' other British deck, so he might not actually have access to the Wellington here. Berto Burrito is going to choose to wipe out the board, dropping a high-altitude bombing, a flying bomb. Of course, this Bryansk Irregulars is going to be coming down so that he doesn't simply die on board. And I kind of would like to see the Bryansk Irregulars come down first, just to get its own operation cost up to 4, because, let's be real, Berto Burrito's not going to be attacking or moving this Bryansk at any point this game, so if he puts the operation cost up to 4, he could potentially cost the victory, but he has the 3rd Scorched Earth in hand, so it's not that big of an issue. And Innocent Bubbles here is now, just wants to find a bomber, something that gets past the Bryansk Irregulars, but instead he's just going to find a double entrapment. And Berto Burrito might just rip the Seaboard Invasion. Get some units in the front line. You know, Bryansk is protecting you for now. Try to find some units that put your opponent under pressure. Because after all, Innocent Bubbles is on 8 HQ. He can just die out of nowhere here. Berto Burrito's decided to instead drop the Hour of Need and the Banshee, take out one of the units, and the Empire Strikes top deck is going to end Game 1 for Innocent Bubbles. So, taking that game by the skin of his teeth, just managing to go under Berto Burrito. And, man, that was an incredibly spicy play with the suppression on his own unit. Suppressing his own unit there to reduce its operation cost down and take the win. So, you see here, Innocent Bubbles has won on his British deck and is now 1-0 in the series. So, just going to get those scores updated, and here we'll do another giveaway. So again, exclamation mark giveaway if you haven't done it already. Again, less than half the people currently watching are in the giveaway. So if you want gold, and it is gold, it's not just a pack, it's actually valuable for you regardless of where you are in your current collection. press or type exclamation mark giveaway in Twitch chat to enter. But in the meantime, let's draw another entrant, and we have Hanson's Holes, or Benjamin Meyer. I don't know, shows up as two different things here, but regardless, you have won the third giveaway, and I will be DMing you your code after the stream is done. So that is going to be, we will get game 2 right underway, because after all, this is a best of 7. So there will be many games ahead of us. Both players will have to try to win with all of their decks here, and if they can't win with all of their decks, they're going to try to get as many wins on the way out as possible. So, you know, we'll see what Berto Burrito is going to do. Is he going to roll it back with that US-Soviet deck? Does he believe in the power of Bryansk and Scorched Earths to get it out of there? Now that Innocent Bubbles doesn't have Brit Air, it's going to be harder for him to go through the guards. It's going to be harder for him to simply just buff up a single big unit. So Innocent Bubbles might be not wanting to bring Jagro. Self-damage could just potentially die. And I have just been told that both, well, yeah, both players have immediately requeued, and we'll just have them restart the match, same decks. After all, there are rules to be followed, and the players were told in advance to not queue. So let's get that spectator mode going again. And after all, it is... Apologies for the brief moments between games. Normally when you see this in the official cards broadcast, you have Mark Theus working behind the scenes doing all of this, while the casters are covering the games and doing the commentary. It's quite difficult to do this all on your by yourself at the same time, but I will not have to worry about that in future streams, because there will be a series of guest casters joining me up here in the casting booth to give commentary and their thoughts on the games, on the decks, on the players. So you will have that to look forward to on future streams as well. So just going to get the spectator mode reset. And once the games get going, we will pull them back up. And it looks like we are getting back into Game 2. We have Berto Burrito on his Japan deck, and Innocent Bubbles, or Berto Burrito on one of his Japan decks. In particular, it is the Japan-France Resistance deck, and Innocent Bubbles bringing his German-Finnish Heinz. So it's going to be quite interesting to see how this matchup turns out. Innocent Bubbles finding both of his Blitz Doctrines opening hand, meaning that these cards cannot be milled. They cannot be overdrawn by Berto Burrito. That is exactly the type of hand that he is looking for here. So as we see, Innocent Bubbles with the 1-0 series lead and a beautiful hand. Are the stats generated by double Blitz Doctrine going to be enough to stay in the game, stay on the board against Berto Burrito's constant pin, constant AoE board clears, constant forced draw, and attempting to just end this game by forced fatigue damage as quickly as possible? We see already Bubbles is upgrading that first Blitz Doctrine in hand, but he already is being slowed down by one copy of Vive la Resistance and a copy of Take Initiative. The Resistance is coming out to deal 1 damage to his HQ, rather than destroying a card in his deck, and that is absolutely the correct choice in this situation, because these compromises coming out from Berto Burrito will be giving Innocent Bubbles more healing than he will really need to, whereas once he reaches Fatigue, suddenly those Resistances, those extra cards that could have been in his deck, are going to be worth a lot more than 1 HQ defense. So Berto now just left in a really awkward situation. Your opponent has 6 cards in hand, and you never want to see that as a mill deck, because it means 2 forced draws, and they still get their natural draw. And on top of that, he himself has, if I'm counting this correctly, 8 cards in his own hand, meaning that if he goes for compromise, he is going to force overdraw himself, and that's absolutely not what he wants to do. So instead, he's going to go Type 94 out of the mist on his own Type 94 to replay that and get a second surprise attack added to his hand immediately. And these are just the really fun, big brain synergies that you can do in classic mode that, like, most of us, myself included, hadn't even thought of. Because Out of the Mist and Type 94 TK have never really existed in Standard at the same time. So it's these fun little combos that really makes classic mode so enjoyable to play, so enjoyable to watch. Is to see these wild synergies and these wild combos that you never really normally get to see. Now, Innocent Bubbles is going to trigger his first Contest Doctrine, and that's going to give all of these tanks in his hand +1/+1, but that slow turn also means that he ends the turn with 7 cards in hand, because the Contest Doctrine developed into the Panther D, and that's going to give Berto Burrito the opportunity to force overdraw if he wants. Instead, he's just simply going to clear out the Jaegers with the Bombing Raid. And honestly, this is probably a good call, because some of these tanks are going to start coming down with huge HQ, or not HQ, huge HP totals, and are going to be quite difficult to remove with just straight damage from the cards like Bombing Raid, whereas the surprise attacks of the Honorable Deaths and the Honor and Loyalties are going to be able to maybe get rid of them more easily. Here comes out the second Blitz Doctrine, and if you're Berto Burrito, you are cursing right now, because things are going quite poorly. A flak comes out developed off of the second Blitz Doctrine, going to start doing immediate HQ damage, and Berto Burrito can start absolutely destroying some of Innocent Bubbles' deck here. Here comes the first Honorable Death. I suspect we will see a compromise into a second Honorable Death, although the Key 83 here is also a possibility. And we start seeing cards going off the deck. Lotus Fired, a KFC, another Panzer A. There will be a fourth overdraw here coming up. It's the Fast Times, one of Innocent Bubbles' 2 rotated cards in this deck. But second Contest Doctrine is coming out. Panther G is picked up, and that's going to be huge, because that cannot be targeted by orders. So it can't be hit by the surprise attacks. It can't be hit by the Out of the Mists, the Honor and Loyalties. That card is going to have to be just constantly pinned, and until To the Last Man can be picked up, or it just simply dies from constant AoE. And double naval power in Berto Burrito's hand does mean he has that opportunity. He finds a Liberation, and Liberation on turn 6 to overdraw the opponent is almost always the correct play. But maybe he just wants to get this key down. He can also drop the Honor and Loyalty if he's afraid of having the unit on board. There's a few different opportunities. He's probably going to hold on to these surprise attacks because they actually have great synergy with the naval operation. They're able to turn each of them into 1 credit destroy a unit, so he does go for the Liberation, and I quite like this play. Just heal 9, get the healing in while you can before there's more units on the board. Overdraws a 38T. Bubbles is probably quite happy to see that overdraw, because when playing against mill, you generally want to, if you're going to have to mill a card, you generally want it to be milling a card draw, so you're not forced to draw that otherwise. And the Panther G unsurprisingly hits the board. Compromise pickup. Berto Burrito can raise his HQ total again, but I quite like this play. The key hits the board, and the key is going to need to try to attack the Panther G, just looking at the hand right now. And if it can't attack the Panther G, or doesn't attack the Panther G, you at least want it to stick around on the board a little bit, to just deny draws. Oh, sorry, not to deny draws, to get draws, to try to find answers, as well as to continue putting Innocent Bubbles' hand size and deck total under pressure. The White Death is going to come out to prevent the key from drawing. The 38T comes out as another 4/5 on the board. And Berto Burrito here is looking in a good position. The Panther G is answered. And of course, that was developed off the second Contest Doctrine. The Panther D in hand is developed off the first Contest Doctrine. So that is the last of those types of minions that Berto Burrito has to worry about. But if he goes all in with the surprise attacks, which he is doing here to completely clear up the board, Innocent Bubbles is quite likely to just simply drop the Panther D and hope his opponent doesn't have an answer for it. Because you've seen a decent amount of tools come out here. But Berto Burrito has that single copy of Phony War in the hand, and that's going to be give him the opportunity to just completely refill this hand and go straight back to going after Innocent Bubbles' forced draws. Panzer F comes out here, which is another card draw. Picks up a Panzer A with a Dornier. That is going to allow it to attack HQ immediately. So Panther D remains, but it's possible that Innocent Bubbles could actually give the Panther D Blitz. There is a world where it could get Blitz here. Where Dornier can push it to the front lines to cheat out 3 credits. The Panzer F, if that gets found by Bubbles, that gives all German tanks Blitz. So for 10 credits, if that unit's on the board with the Dornier, that can do Panther D straight to the HQ, and that will be an absolutely crazy, 9 damage, so 18 damage immediately to the HQ of Berto Burrito. It certainly won't kill him, but you don't want that to happen. See another 38T Overdrawn. That's another card that Berto Burrito probably wishes was a different unit. But you also are happy that it's tanks. You'd much rather see tanks overdrawn than, say, the Heinkel. The Heinkel's probably the best overdraw for Innocent Bubbles from his perspective, as in a card that probably was never going to be doing anything this game. It's a low in stats. You don't really want to attack with it because it fills your hand with cards that you don't want to play. So instead, he's just going to be dumping units onto the board, forcing Berto Burrito to have or not have to the last man. And as we see from his hand, he does not have to the last man. He also does not have any more naval operations, so this board cannot be pinned to simply be slowed down. And the stats on board is too much for Winter Regiment to do a whole lot of anything. He could theoretically salvage the Panzer F to get his own Panzer F to choose one of 3 cards, and that might be the best way to get deeper into his deck to find to the last man. Picks up Bonsai. That's going to be an amazing card. It's going to take out 4 of Innocent Bubbles' 5 units, and it comes out on curve. But that does mean the 5/5 Flam Panzer sticks around, and Innocent Bubbles is going to be able to immediately reload that board with larger, large units. So it's got to be the Bonsai here. I don't really see a different play other than the Bonsai here. He could buff up a Desperate Measures. That clears some of the units. Buffed up Desperate Measures trade. Yeah, that doesn't do it. So he rips the Bonsai, and there's the Panzer F that we were talking about. The Panther D comes down, hits the board. It is a massive 9/8 unit. And Flam Panzer goes face, and Berto Burrito, he has the answer. He has the honor and loyalty. The question is, how much resources does he want to play out from his own hand before he drops this phony war into honor and loyalty? And honestly, I'd like to see the Imperial Decree phony war. That way you draw 1 card yourself. You sort of swap out this Imperial Decree in your hand with a different card, and then drop the double honor and loyalty. And based on the hand size, it's sort of a risk to go for honor and loyalty on the Panther D first. So immediately, there's an immediate chance that it gets added as the last card to hand and drawn immediately. However, if you miss that, you then have an extra chance of overdrawing it. But either way, he gets the overdraw. But this huge board for Bubbles with the Greif, double Panzer F. This is going to be a lot of damage going face to the HQ this turn. Now, it's not quite lethal damage. There's no Blitzkrieg here. If there was a Blitzkrieg here, we would start doing lethal calculations. But thankfully for Berto Burrito, there's no lethal on this turn. But again, how does he answer this? Yes, he could buff up a Desperate Measures, but that's not enough to clear the board. And Arming the Resistance doesn't do much. He can get down the home defense, but suddenly that huge HQ total he was on drops down to 7, and he can't stop. He can stop the tanks from having 0 operation. And he could even stop the tanks from having Blitz on board, but we see this, the second Panzer F in the hand of Innocent Bubbles, and that is threatening an additional 9 burst from hand. So even if Berto Burrito could clear this entire board, he would have to clear this entire board and get the guard down. And I don't believe that he has the credits to do so. Now we see him holding out of the mist over the KFC. He can take that. Drops the home defense. I imagine we're going to see the winter defense coming out, or not, the winter regiment coming out and trading out the Panzer F, and just hoping that your opponent doesn't have Jägerbomber, your opponent doesn't have Panzer F. But at this point, you've seen the cards that Innocent Bubbles has overdrawn. You've seen the cards he hasn't overdrawn. And you have a very, if you're Berto Burrito, you know you're dead. you play just like in the 1 in a million chance your opponent just has the worst hand ever, but you know you're dead. And Innocent Bubbles is absolutely going to find this lethal here. He has a few choices at lethal. He goes for the Yegg Bomber face, and that is Innocent Bubbles taking a 2-0 lead in this series. So he's halfway there to beating Berto Burrito. We saw Berto Burrito switching. We saw Berto Burrito switching decks there, still unable to get the win. And Innocent Bubbles moving forward with 2 wins on 2 of his very aggressive decks. And now the 2 decks left he has is Feigned Retreat, which is the most aggressive deck out of everything he has, and the Soviet Japan self-damage. And just looking at Berto's lineup, he gets self-damage into Jagro is looking more and more like a possibility, but self-damage might be able to be picked off by a few of Berto's slower decks, like the Resistance deck, like the US Soviet ramp deck. So things could very quickly equalize down to a 3-on-3 game 7 if things start going poorly for Innocent Bubbles. But however, so far things have absolutely not been going poorly for Innocent Bubbles. So marking that the 2-0 lead, potentially halfway there, we will pull our first big our first big prize here of the evening. So this is, instead of the regular prizes are, I believe, 150 gold. The big prize is going to be 300 gold. So again, to get into that giveaway, press exclamation or type exclamation mark giveaway to enter the giveaway. We're still missing a ton of people in the giveaway who are watching the stream. So if you want to get in on that, you absolutely should. And let's pull the entrant. And Cursed is the winner of the first big giveaway of this stream. So congratulations, Cursed. Again, I will DM you the code after the stream. But enough of that. Let's start getting ready to get back into Game 3 by getting spectator mode set up. So have to clear the battles. And yeah, I mean, so far things really looking good for Innocent Bubbles. And I think we will see Berto Burrito warm up into this. That's always sort of the question of these longer sets, because in cards, in cards, normally what we see is best of 3s, and then occasionally like a big final will be a best of 5. So best of 5, there's still not a ton of room to come back in. Whereas best of 7, and once we get to the finals, best of 9, this is sort of a completely different beast. You have to have a lot of stamina, but you also have to have a lot of mental fortitude. One, to not just, if you fall down to an early lead, not just get into your head and think like, oh, I can't win the game. It's just over. Like, I'm down too many games. I'm getting so unlucky. You have a lot of games floating around in your head as you get later and later into the series. So it's easy for that to happen. But on the other hand, it's easy to like come out swinging. But like if things start slipping, it's easy to just get fatigued. It feels like you should have won the series already if you had such a dominant lead. Or sometimes you just trade even and even, and eventually one player just gets tired. It's difficult to play top level cards against a top level player just over and over and over. But here we are going into game number 3, and it's going to be a Japan mirror, but a very, very different Japan decks here. So it's going to be Berto Burrito on the I don't know why for some reason OBS here has decided to switch the players' perspectives around. So let me just update the scores. It is, of course, a 2-0 lead for Innocent Bubbles. And now we're getting Bubbles' perspective down here on the bottom. OBS gets a little funky when you have 2 instances of the game running. But here we have Feigned Retreat versus Japan-France Resistance. And this is going to be a very interesting game because Innocent Bubbles will hit fatigue. And if he hits fatigue fast enough, Berto Burrito can actually just deny Bubbles from playing a good chunk of his deck. You know, he might not be able to overdraw him, but he can get him to a position where Innocent Bubbles will just simply die from fatigue damage if he starts playing more units if the Fade Retreat comes out. On the other hand, Innocent Bubbles does have a secondary potential playstyle that's very abnormal for Fade Retreat, where normally you just want to jam Fade Retreat as soon as you get it. And that is to just not ever play Fade Retreat. If, you know, you keep the small hand sizes, you go wide on the board, and your opponent drawing new cards is just simply going to be more fuel to your engine of just playing out every card in your hand without playing the Fade Retreat. And if at any point Berto Burrito starts to get into a position where you can just sort of try to pressurize Bubbles down, then the Fade Retreat can come out much later in the game. So we'll see if Innocent Bubbles sort of sees that secondary playstyle that's very abnormal that might be able to give him a good victory over Berto Burrito. But speaking of a good victory over Berto Burrito, we see Innocent Bubbles with a very, very aggressive opener start. We see the Aichi on the board, the 3-2 out of the 2-cost Aichi, and Berto Burrito down to 12 HQ already, but he now has control of the front line. He has a Kurume blocking the HQ, so that's going to protect him through anything. The Feint Retreat gets guaranteed picked up off the Errado. But if you look at Berto Burrito's hand, he has access to a lot of draw, a lot of healing. He is definitely not out of this game anytime soon. Picks up the 4th compromise. I imagine that we're going to start seeing compromises flying out here. He can't get it. He's not into forced overdraw territory yet, unless he picks up a Vive la Resistance, which he does. So this is going to overdraw Bubbles' first card this game, while getting Berto Burrito himself a little deeper into the deck. And this is the great thing about open deckless tournaments, rather than just say on ladder. Berto Burrito can look at what Bubbles is playing in his deck and say, does he run Sendai Regiments? Does he run Suppress? And the answer to both is no. There's no way to get through this Kurobe Regiment that isn't just the sort of old-fashioned, fair way of getting through the Kurobe, of just destroying it, triggering the destruction effect, and ending your turn. And here Bubbles is choosing to get out the Dragon Slayer. It looks like he's trying to dump a bit of his hand. The Signal Regiment is going to put constant pressure on Berto if he can't get rid of it, but of course, the 2-cost for Glory in hand is always an option. And the Ottoman Loyalty pickup's also really, really big here to get rid of this Dragon Slayer, and also not just get it off the board, but reset the Veteran effect. So now, if it comes down in the future, it will come down as a 4-3 rather than a 6-4. So I imagine we will see Ottoman Loyalty sending Dragon Slayer back. Then the Compromise comes out to overdraw 2 additional cards here. Type 93, that's going to be a very, very powerful card. And the Type 94, which is going to be a substantially less powerful card for Innocent Bubbles. And now, there is a very interesting question, because again, Innocent Bubbles is very clearly not dumping Feint Retreat. He doesn't want to discard these cards in hand. He doesn't want to get the Feint Retreat trigger going. But how inefficiently is he going to have to play? How much time is he going to give Berto Burrito to simply just play these compromises over and over and over? Before, you know, things just start getting bad. Resistance coming out, dealing HQ damage. Again, you see Bubbles sort of sticking to that game plan of deal damage to the HQ, not remove cards from deck. But how does Berto answer this board? There's no AoEs currently in hand. They can get rid of the Signal Regiment, so that's not going to deal too much damage if he can get an AoE. And he certainly has no lack of card draw to find future AoEs. But this is... He would really love to find a naval operation right here. Because with the Imperial Order, you know, he can buff up the damage on a naval operation or desperate measures to take out more of these units. And then he has the Type 94 follow-up to pin out something that survives. But instead, he's just sitting here really awkwardly. He's going to go for the Compromise, drop an Imperial Decree first to make room in his hand. And he doesn't find anything that's going to trigger on the Imperial Decree. Take initiative. You know, he can play it. It overdraws Bubbles, but Berto Burrito will also overdraw a card because he will stay at 9 cards in hand. For Glory can come out on the Signal Regiment, but Signal Regiment's not dealing any damage this turn anyways. Take Initiative comes out. Kurume pickup is going to be able to slow Bubbles down quite a bit. Another Type 94 overdraw. He's happy about that, I'm sure. And now Bubbles just gets a huge amount of damage face. Not as big as you would want or necessarily expect for the number of units he has on board. There's no Blitzkrieg, so there's no Type 93s to get damage numbers up really high. But it's just steady pressure. Berto does have to eventually deal with this board, and he can only survive maybe 2 or 3 more turns of this board being just there. And even if he answers it, there is a question of just how many more boards like this is Innocent Bubbles going to be able to create this game. And does Berto Burrito have the ability to answer all of them? Berto Burrito overdrawing an Honor and Loyalty. Not necessarily the worst card to overdraw in this situation. It's certainly, he's not overdrawing a Desperate Measures. You would hate to see that. So for Glory comes out on the Signal Regiment, and then the Winter Regiment comes down, take a Yokosuka, take out a Type 94, and that's a big swing. It stops the damage. It's going to force Bubbles to react to the Winter Regiment, but that is, again, one of 3, like, larger threats you have in your deck. So if Bubbles does answer this Winter Regiment, which I do expect that we will see him do, well, then just eventually, how do you win the game? If you're down low enough, do you have enough force draw in the game to actually kill Bubbles before you die in fatigue yourself? Because you are also drawing a lot of cards. And just a quick fatigue counter. Innocent Bubbles, 18 cards. Berto Burrito, 15 cards. So they're over halfway through the deck, but Innocent Bubbles currently has a 3-point... he's 3 points further behind in fatigue than Berto Burrito. The Shibata comes down. Berto Burrito's going to take that out right away, because otherwise he will just get absolutely destroyed. Arming the Resistance comes out. This is going to overdraw a bunch of cards. The last Compromise comes out. We see Type 93 go away, so that's, again, a huge card. 22nd Infantry. Bubbles is happy to see that. Bonsai pickup from Berto Burrito, as well as the On the Ascent pickup, is going to threaten a lot of damage here. And he makes room on board, and this is suddenly looking like a huge On the Ascent. On the Ascent can destroy 4 units, and then he still has the credits to play Commit the Reserves on the Shiden afterwards, and the Shiden gone without dealing any damage is huge for Bubbles. I'm quite surprised Bubbles played this card from hand, rather than, say, like a Martyr, because it's not like, it's not like Berto has a lot of units that are just suddenly going to start trading. In fact, there's 0 Blitz units left in his deck now that Radiant Brigade and Winter Regiment are gone. So he could have played, say, like a Martyr, and then traded off the Martyr, or forced Berto to remove the Martyr before the Martyr threatens any card draw, and then keep the Shiden in hand for a 8 damage face later in the game. But we see a big swing turn going in the way of Berto Burrito. The Type 93 is finally picked up, but there's no longer a board for that to do anything. The Errado can come out freely, because there's no orders left in Innocent Bubbles' deck. And now we see the Feigned Retreat come out, because it's getting rid of these Take Initiatives, it's getting rid of the Vive la Resistance, and now the question is, does Innocent Bubbles have the ability to end the game? Does he have the ability to get across the finish line against Berto Burrito with the 13 cards left in his deck? And I just have to wonder, did he have to go for this? Could he have just, dealt the 2 damage to his HQ with the 2 Vive la Resistance and passed that turn? Maybe you're worried about, maybe you're worried about the Phony War giving you more force draw, but you've seen 4 Compromise and at least 2 Honor and Loyalty. 1 was played, 1 was overdrawn. So the amount of force draw coming out from Berto Burrito is very slim. So by playing this Feigned Retreat, suddenly Innocent Bubbles no longer has the fatigue win condition. He is going for he doesn't have AoE's win condition. But looking at your opponent's hand, they have a Radiant Brigade and 2 1/1 Blitzers on top of this board. So he plays out a bunch of cards, he gets down to the key, and, Berto he's probably not going to play to the last man here, because there's many better options, including this top deck naval operation, which is going to affect everything but the key and Errado back there in the support line. But he also has the opportunity to go for the Radiant Brigade, which he does on the Shibata, make sure he doesn't take any unnecessary damage here. Now, he might just trade out the Aichi. Oh, he has the 2-cost Aichi. That will buff the Aichi on board's attack up to 5 and can trade with the key. So he's choosing to just pin the key, and that's perfectly fine, because the key is going to draw Bubbles more cards, and that's going... For every additional card Innocent Bubbles draws at this point, it is a card it's one more card in his deck he can't play because of fatigue. Although with his 42 HQ total, at this point, he might just be able to play every card in his deck, be drawn into like 6+ fatigue, and still try to get across the finish line. But with 2 naval operations, another Type 94 in hand, on top of a bonsai, a To the Last Man, single regiment god, sheet and gone, I think this game is finally going the way of Berto Burrito. Berto Burrito looks like he's finally going to win a game. And was this Innocent Bubbles' best play? Or was it better to go for that, just sit back, try to take all the pressure Berto can do, and just simply say, I win on fatigue. I might be, even if you can get me a card or two ahead, you have 15 health, I have 42 health. If I could answer like the 5 units left in your deck, I win. Instead, he went for this feigned retreat, and as we're seeing, Berto Burrito finally got the draws, and it's not just like, oh, he got the top decks. He has 8 cards left in deck, and these cards would have been amazing at any point this game. And it looks like Innocent Bubbles might be ready to throw in the towel. He has a 9-unit board here, but there's a Kurume, there's an Ambush Chinu. He sees the cards in his opponent's hand. He knows what's happening. It's going to be a 4-unit trade, 4-unit trade into the Chinu. He can't deal any damage to the HQ. He can't deal any damage to the Kurume. I suspect that we will see the Aichi trade out the key here. The naval operation comes out to pin everything. And trading out the key here will also you put Kurume next to the HQ, which guarantees an additional stop of any potential damage. Chooses not to play out the Aichi. Instead, he goes for the bombing raid. There's literally nothing Berto Burrito could do to lose the game at this point. And we will see if Innocent Bubbles decides to throw in the towel, because not only do Dina and Dragon Slayer not have enough to get across the finish line, they will also draw cards as he plays them, and he surrenders, knowing that, in fact, the game is over, and that is Berto Burrito on the board, bringing this to a 2-1 series. So, let's just quickly update the board. So that is Berto Burrito taking a win on his Japan-France Resistance. And again, Berto Burrito has 2 Japan decks. So his other deck is Japan-Germany Aggro. Not Feigned Retreat variety, though. It's a sort of somewhat of an air sub-theme Japan-German. This is going to be very interesting to see if he plays that. But he, of course, has his his 2 other decks at this point. He has German-France discard, somewhat mid-rangey, and his all-in research ramp, and then Jagro, and that's up against Jagro and self-damage. So there's some bad matchups in there. There's some really, really good matchups in there. We'll see which way which way the wind blows. But in the meantime, I hope everybody is enjoying the stream. I will be doing another giveaway here, so if you haven't entered the giveaway, !giveaway. So yeah, we're certainly racking up the total number of entries here. So let's draw another entrant. And Sanios17, I don't know how you pronounce it, but you have won the giveaway. So again, if you win the giveaway, you can expect a Twitch whisper from me after the stream. Make sure your Twitch whispers are open. So you know what? Actually, let's do a second draw. We've got a bunch of giveaways here, and you guys have been awesome putting up with some of the technical difficulties with the stream, and just the difficulties of running a stream. And the winner of the next giveaway is Berlinoid. So you have won the giveaway. You can again expect it later, but let's not keep the players waiting too much longer. Let's get spectator mode set back up. And this is going to be all right. So now that we're 2-1, who do people have winning this? Obviously, Bubbles still has the lead, but is losing in fatigue to Japan-France Resistance going to break his mental? Is this going to be the start of a comeback for Berto Burrito? Who's to say? And okay, spectator mode is ready to go. We are off to the races. obviously we will switch over once the players get going. But it's also going to be quite interesting to see here the sort of the thought process of what thought process goes into what is the next deck they bring. And here we are going to go ahead and see that the next matchup is going to be the US Soviet versus Soviet Japan. So that is self-damage versus research ramp. And man, that is not definitely not the matchup Bubbles wanted here. So we see Berto Burrito trying to decide how many war machines he wants to keep, and that is an actual question. Obviously, you want to always keep at least one war machine, but is 3 war machines, no card draw, really something that you want to see? He decides yes it is, and picks up the Quartermasters, so it's suddenly becoming absolutely what you want to see in a War Bonds pickup. Things are looking great for Berto Burrito, but if we look over at Innocent Bubble's side, the T-35 is going to start doing constant chip damage to Berto Burrito's HQ total, and we've seen the HQ total on this deck can be the sort of the big issue. US Soviet doesn't have as much healing as you might want. The Yak is going to come out here even better, and Berto Burrito suddenly has to decide, does he go for the double war bonds? Does he risk playing the Quartermasters? Because from Berto Burrito's perspective, you're thinking, I'm not going to play a lot of units this game. His is a deck built around getting tempo off of removing units. So if I play Quartermasters, it could stick, and suddenly I cycle through my entire deck. Or I play Quartermasters, he answers with double Red Dawn, and I lose the game. Because suddenly I have no card draw, I've just activated all of their self-damage effects. We see another 34th Guard getting picked up and reduced in the hand. Berto Burrito choosing to play more conservatively, and that was probably a good call, because I would have seen a Red Dawn trade from the Yak coming out. Brion's pickup can stop some of this damage, and it fits its curve nicely with the War Bonds, but Berto Burrito's hand is doing absolutely nothing at the moment. We see the 4th War Machine getting picked up. Like, it's 10 credits to 4, but the quality of cards that he can spend on those credits definitely is not equal, as we see Innocent Bubbles. He says, you know what, 4 credits is good enough, because with those 4 credits, I'm going to summon 12 worth of stats, whereas with your 10 credits, you're going to play a 4th War Machine. Now, this Bomber Mafia can come out, and it would take out the Yak, but instead, Berto Burrito, recognizing that these 6/6s are going to be a huge issue, and there's not a lot off of Bomber Mafia that's going to solve that issue. So he instead decides to go for the card draw, get another War Bonds. This is going to give him access to 3 additional cards, 2 off the Quartermasters, 1 off the War Bonds draw, as well as the additional credit. But we see Innocent Bubbles here, just dropping all the units on the board, and importantly, dropping that 60th Cavalry. Berto Burrito can only play 1 order next turn, and he is under a ton of pressure. The Seaborn Invasion top deck, that's huge. That sends back the 34ths. That takes off the immediate pressure after almost all of these units are infantry. And there's really just one play here. It is the Seaborn Invasion. Berto Burrito, thinking through his lines, recognizes Seaborn Invasion is the best play, but importantly, you always draw first, so that's exactly what he does with the Milk Truck. That's also going to offer him a bit of healing. And the Seaborn Invasion gives him a covert, which is guaranteed to be the 3/4 covert, because Seaborn Invasion, of course, totals up to it totals up to 6 attack. And Innocent Bubbles here is going to drop the Ura and pressure a ton of damage straight to the HQ, and drop Berto Burrito down to 6. And he's still limited on the orders. The Bomber Mafia will free him from that limitation, and also take out the Yak, and while he's at it, he's going to force an overdraw from Innocent Bubbles at the start of the next turn, and he's given the B-24D, and we've been focusing a lot on Berto Burrito's health total. If we take a look over at Innocent Bubbles' health total, he's on 9, with no healing in hand. No Great Patriotic Wars, no Island Defenses, we didn't see any of that in his deck. Berto Burrito is simply setting up lethal. With the strategic bombing top deck, he can set up lethal, kill the Coruscant, bring Innocent Bubbles down to 6 health. He's thinking about it. He doesn't actually need to do it. He can drop the Milk Truck, gain 2 HQ on his own, and set up lethal still with B-24D and strategic bombing on the following turn. He instead decides to get the value on the Firebomb, bring Bubbles down to 6 HP, get the mobile defense out, which are both going to threaten Bubbles as well as prevent any potential blitz damage. Although, again, Innocent Bubbles does not run stand together. There are no potential blitz tanks in this deck unless he steals them off of Berto Burrito, which he can do immediately right here. Takes the T70. Now, unfortunately, there's not a lot he can do with that T70. It's going to die. And suddenly, Berto Burrito swings things around very quickly with a well-timed Seaborn Invasion top deck and ties this series in very, very rapid speed at 2-2. Now, Innocent Bubbles probably... He needs to sort of think about it this way. Innocent Bubbles needs to think, this was a bad matchup. This was a matchup that I could expect to lose. If you told me I'm playing self-damage versus ramp, I'm probably going to lose. He can't think about how close he was to winning and let that affect his gameplay. He needs to just focus on what he needs to do to win the remaining games here. But, that's going to be a lot harder now that this ramp deck that potentially could be quite vulnerable, and was quite vulnerable, we saw, to air. Well, that is through. The series is tied up 2-2, and now it's anyone's game. Now we're basically down to a best of 3. We're 4 games in. It's still anybody's series to take. And again, the scoring here, what's important is not simply winning the set, but winning as many games as possible. And if you're winning the set, you want to win by as big a margin as possible. And if you're losing the set, you want to lose by as little a margin as possible, because it's going to come down to game difference on tiebreakers on who is going to enter at the end of week 3. So they're going to really focus on winning as many games as they can here, not simply just the set. But with that being said, let's go ahead and do another draw, because it's just about that time, So again, exclamation mark giveaway to join, and let's draw, and the winner of the giveaway is Yanks189. So Yanks189, I will DM you on Twitch at the end of the stream. So with that being said, let us update the scores. Get spectator mode set up. Alright, set up on 1. And now, with both players with 2 decks, it is, once again, going to be interesting to see what they bring. Because at this point, I'm really excited to see Berto Burrito's German-France deck. I'm really excited to see how that's going to work. And I think it might have potential against Innocent Bubbles, although if the Feigned Retreat can get off, things can go downhill very, very rapidly there. So we have everything ready. And telling the players to go. So yeah. So Bubbles with the self-damage and Feigned Retreat versus Berto Burrito's Jagro and German-France. And, man, Berto Burrito's Jagro might be the sort of the tough one to get through here, because it's a bad matchup into self-damage. And how is it into the Feigned Retreat? I mean, the reason Feigned Retreat became dominant is that it beat other types of Jagro on top of beating other decks. You just have access to your entire deck in a way that other Jagros simply do not. We'll also see these Shibata regiments being of less value, but here we go. We got into the game, and it's going to be Berto Burrito on his Jagro into Innocent Bubbles' self-damage deck. And these Shibatas are going to actually be huge into self-damage. I didn't even think about this. These Shibatas actually might turn this around. Self-damage versus Jagro has been historically one of the most one-sided matchups in competitive cards in recent times, of just self-damage absolutely destroying Jagro without even giving them a chance to play. But with double Shibata regiment in the hand of Berto Burrito, suddenly, all of these Signal regiments and these the Sickles and the Red Dawns are going to be dealing far more damage than Innocent Bubbles probably really wants to be taking. But on the flip side, the 456th can also just absolutely snowball on stats and run away with the game. If these players if Berto Burrito is not careful. Yeah, I don't know why I just completely could not think of how to finish that sentence there. But we see the Aichi coming down, and the Aichi is, again, a very annoying threat for self-damage. It's one of the better, probably one of the best cards of the matchup, just because it eats 2 things. You have to You have to kill it, and you have to kill it again, and self-damage doesn't run a lot of plagues. It's really only the yak. So we're just going to see this Aichi chipping away the damage, and the Shibata comes down. We see Berto Burrito doing none of the normal Jaguar things. Against any other matchup, you just see the Cavalry Regiment go forward on turn 1 into the, into the expansion, just try to cycle through your deck, maybe play out the Type 94. Just all of these normal Jaguar things, and instead he's playing it completely differently. He's going for value with the Aichi. He's going for the Shibatas to try to slow down the gameplay. But, this absolutely massive 456th, it is going to be able to get taken out by the Yokosuka, being a 1 credit 3 damage, very, very efficient, but it is going to eat into a ton of resources, and suddenly, you're quite low on cards. Your opponent's low on health, but we're going to see the 34th coming out. Maybe instead we're going to see the 39th to actually steal the Aichi. Alternatively, it could steal the Shibata. Both are pretty good cards. In this case, I would probably take the Aichi just because it's a more frustrating card for you to deal with. And that's exactly what he's going to go for. But once these restores we see in hand start coming down, might be a change of plans, although maybe Berto Burrito actually wants to take the opportunity to go for the expansion. This might be the last opportunity to go for an expansion, and this turn suddenly could become an absolutely game-deciding turn. Does he go for the restore, or does he push forward to try to get the expansion draw? Because we see the Corson in hand. If he goes for this restore line, he simply doesn't have the answer to the Corson, and will just get blown out on board. The 5-5 will come forward, the Aichi will start. The Aichi won't be able to start firing, but the 34th will come out. This expansion probably won't be able to go off in future turns. But on the flip side, if he doesn't play the restore, it's the 39th is still getting to the front line. You better get the best expansion ever. And you can see this is the decision Berto Burrito is contemplating between. From his perspective, it's really, really difficult to say, and he can't make up his mind. I can't even make up my mind. If I was in his situation, I think I'd probably go for the restore line. It just feels a little bit safer. Your opponent doesn't run that many guards. The restore can also stop the Aichi. It threatens damage if your opponent doesn't have guard. And, what are you hoping to find off the expansion? More 1-drops that die to Bloody Sickle and Winter Warfare? But instead, we're going to see this Corson come down. And actually, I completely forgot about this, but the Corson was drawn off of the Zukov, so it's a 1+1/+1. And Innocent Bubbles might actually just be contemplating pushing Corson. Looks like he's leaning towards playing just the T-35. He also might be thinking about just wanting to get out the 456th behind the guard. He decides for the T-35. It does, again, continue to hurt him, and he doesn't currently get any synergy for taking damage on his turn. But it's also putting a bit of a clock on Berto Burrito. At this point, you are looking to, if you're Innocent Bubbles, you're looking to win the game in the next 2 turns, 2 to 3 turns. And if you're Berto Burrito, you are looking to, at this point, with the Corset on the board, your opponent is simply not giving you the opportunity to win the game anytime soon with this restore. So instead, you are looking to simply answer their board and use your more efficient card draw to find yourself a way back into the game. And that's exactly what he goes for. He trades off the restore immediately, recognizing that, goes for the expansion, and the expansion finds his second Aichi and a suppression, and that suppression is going to be able to do one of many things. Well, there's 3 main things you want to do here. It's probably going to come out on Innocent Bubbles' stolen Aichi, and that is going to suppress it and draw a card. And 3-2 Smokescreen Bomber. Innocent Bubbles picks up the KV. That's absolutely massive. Now, obviously, there's just the possibility that a Winter Warfare top deck could feasibly end the game. Like, Winter Warfare, counteroffensive, trade, would create 7 damaged units. That's 14, 16. Yeah, Winter Warfare was actually just lethal there. So, as big of a draw as KV is, it's a smaller draw than literally winning the game. So, Innocent Bubbles is just going to trade off. It actually damages the T-35, get out the 456th, which is going to gain guard off of the T-35 damage, so it's going to prevent any future Shiden shenanigans. And, man, just pushes forward 14 HQ. The Dina pickup is good if he can find some Yokosukas that can get up some crazy attack. The Shibata is just not what you really want to see in this situation. You're simply just staring down. I mean, you're staring down it's well, he can take out the T-35, so it's not lethal on board, but it's functionally lethal on board. And it looks like Innocent Bubbles is going to take a 3-2 series lead here. The Shibata and the Signal Regiment coming down, they're just threatening to try to burn out your opponent, and that is the best line Berto can go for in this situation, and the Ura top deck is going to make it not even close. And actually, is the Ura top deck... No, the Ura top deck was not necessary for lethal. Bubbles is, in fact, even showing that the Ura top deck wasn't necessary for lethal by going for this cool play where he trades with the Aichi into the Dina to create 2 damaged units, which is 4 extra damage from the counter-offensive, and that's going to be enough to get across the line and take a 3-2 series lead. So, with that, Innocent Bubbles only has Feigned Retreat to win with. And, I mean, if you're in a situation where you have one deck to win 2 games, Feigned Retreat is going to be on the top of most players' lists of what deck to do that with. But on the flip side, Berto Burrito does have some interesting decks to potentially beat it. This German-France discard. If it can discard Feigned Retreat, the game's just immediately over. If that comes out, the game is immediately over, and it's not even close. As well as just kind of the constant discard, the draw denial, can feasibly slow Innocent Bubbles down, although the 2-order Feigned is going to make that so much better. It means Innocent Bubbles has almost no dead draws in his deck if Feigned goes off. But Berto Burrito is also going to be able to discard a lot of the card draw if Innocent Bubbles doesn't immediately find a Ratto Feigned, like, sort of in his opening hand. If Innocent Bubbles has to get a bit deeper into his deck to find Feigned Retreat, that's where Berto Burrito's German-France deck is going to be able to sort of come back into the game, deny those options, deny the ability to get deeper into the deck past the 1 natural draw, and try to build a deck, or try to build a board that is going to answer, and just close out the game before your opponent can really get that Feigned Retreat off. And then the other Jagro, I mean, you're just looking to do regular Jagro stuff. Your opponent plays Feigned Retreat, it's 6 credits to do absolutely nothing on that turn, and you're going to look to try to just use that big tempo loss on that 1 turn to close out the game in the next turn or 2. Maybe close out the game on burn damage with the cards like Aichi for sort of close to guaranteed burn damage face, and Signal Regiment, obviously, for burn damage. So that is going to be Berto Burrito's win conditions moving forward into this. And, I mean, his back's up against the wall. He can't lose to Jagro. But Innocent Bubbles wins with Jagro. The series is simply over. So let's set up spectator mode for what will be Game 6 of this series. And now, while we wait for the players to go, let's do one last, well, not one last, we'll certainly be doing more, but let's do another giveaway. So let's draw in the giveaway, and Spellbreaker77 wins the giveaway, so, you know, make sure your Twitch whispers are open. And is Spellbreaker the person who's currently, like, rank 2 on ladder? If I'm remembering correctly, it's spell something on ladder. So Spellbreaker, if you're currently rank 2 on ladder, good luck for end of season, and hopefully that 150 gold is going to, you know, open you the packs, help fill out your collection, or if you have a full collection already, maybe it's going to let you win the season with some style. So, just waiting for the players to get the next game underway, which they have. So here we are off into the mulligan, and we are going to be starting with the Jagro Mirror. So that is going to be a great deal of fun. It is Innocent Bubbles, the Feigned Retreat Jagro's hand on the bottom. And, I mean, you could tell this because there's an expansion in the hand of Berto Burrito, and the expansion is definitely not a card run in Innocent Bubbles' deck. And if you just look at this hand, across the 9 cards on screen, 8 of them are 1 cost. And here we go into Game 6. Innocent Bubbles going first, but with no card draw, and Berto Burrito definitely has the hand to answer back, and the expansions to take a early tempo lead. These expansions are really big. This is sort of the turns where Feigned Jagro... Excuse me, these are the turns where Feigned Jagro can struggle against sort of Expansion Jagro, because Expansion is going to be able to get... Or the Expansion Jagro is going to get able to get these immediate big draw turns. They're going to find better cards earlier in the game, and that's going to be a slight advantage throughout the entire rest of the game. And here, Innocent Bubbles, down to 1 card in hand on turn 3. If he plays this, he chooses to hold it back just because, if Desperate Measures comes out, suddenly it's almost just game over, but 35T is going to get a value trade. Close off the front line. Whirlwind can value trade right back. Same as the Radiant Brigade. Both are solid options here. I would lean towards the Whirlwind trade push up personally, just because Berto Burrito does run a lot of these fighters or air units in general, and if we look at his hand, it actually is shutting off the turn 4 Zerstorer. What it is not shutting off is this Errado coming out. He says, I don't care if it gets pinned, I want the card draw. Now the Yokosuka is going to come out, trade it off, and then followed by the Aichi, which will not get pinned since the Whirlwind is dead. And Innocent Bubbles top decks the turn 5 Fade Retreat. That is just classic Fade Retreat. If you've played cards for a long time, you're well used to this, but that doesn't necessarily mean the game is over. Berto Burrito has his fair share of access to cards as well, and with this Aichi on board, he's going to be able to start just chipping away at Innocent Bubbles' just general health total. Now, here's your question, is your opponent has 1 card in hand, and it's the card they top decked the turn before this one, and you know it's not Errado. So if you're Berto Burrito, you're thinking the odds he has Feigned Retreat is incredibly low next turn. So do I make a Feigned Retreat play? And the Feigned Retreat play here would be to get the Zerstorer down on the board. You say, I don't care about the Radiant Brigade, I'm going to try to put as much pressure on the board as possible for his 1 dead turn. He's going to cycle with the suppression, so he's not going for the Zerstorer. The Shibata pickup will deal 2 damage if he plays it, and the Feigned comes out, but that 2 damage is probably not going to be meaningful by the end of the game. We'll likely see the Aichi going for a value trade. Maybe the Errado to pick off the other unit, and the Shibata coming out would fill out the curve. He instead ends up to opt for the Zerstorer after all, keep type 93 on the board. The Miter pickup can allow him to draw a few cards, but Innocent Bubbles has played this deck before. He knows exactly what time it is, and it is time for turn 6 Fade Retreat. Okay, it is time to lean forward in our seats, because this is going to be one hell of a ride over the next few turns. Signal pickup from Berto Burrito is massive. This means as he trades out unit for unit with Innocent Bubbles, he's going to be able to put Bubbles down on a clock. A similar clock as the clock Innocent Bubbles has with Feigned Retreat. And here's the downside of not playing Shibata last turn. Now, obviously, if you played Shibata last turn, it would not be playing Zerstorer, but now he can't get off these expansions. He really wish he would have top decked a Blitz 1-drop here. Zerstorer can go face for 4 damage for 0 credits, and the 35T can come out. You can even push up Shibata, or in this case, a much better situation is Signal Regiment face. 35T goes face. He says type 93, which is suppressed. I don't care. Type 93, not the draw you want, because it doesn't have the op cost reduced. Draws into Dragon Slayer. Again, not the card you want. It sort of ends your entire turn, and you're not pressuring your opponent's HQ right now, they're pressuring yours, but the Errado pickup means he's guaranteed to hit Desperate Measures on the following turn, and the Dragon Slayer will stop this Aichi from connecting to the HQ. And surely this is just a naval supply run. You say, if you go for the naval supply run, you're sort of saying I'm not ever playing these expansions, but what you are saying is if you don't top deck an answer to Zerstorer, I win the game, and there are very few answers to Zerstorer. There is no oh, and that is not the card you want to see. There is no Sendai's in this deck. There is no commit the reserves. You need to double type 94. Second Errado, you're running out of board space, and that looks like it's it. There's just simply no answer to this massive buffed up Zerstorer, and Berto Burrito is showing why he has that 56% win rate in tournament matches. He knows to play to his outs. He can recognize those very, very tiny, nearly imperceptible moments in the game where the entire outcome of the game, the series, hinges on just a single play. And that is the play of going for the Zerstorer. That is the play of going face, not caring about the expansions, recognizing that I'm putting pressure on my opponent HQ total. I don't care if they have access to the entire rest of their deck if I win the game in 2 turns. They can't deal with big units. Place a big unit, put pressure with that big unit, don't let them trade it out, don't care about the front line, focus on just dealing HQ damage, and he brings it over the line, and that is going to tie up this series at 3-3 meaning that we are going to be going to a Game 7 of Match 1 of the King's Cup. I would expect nothing less from these players. I am incredibly entertained. I hope you guys are also incredibly entertained. We are going into the big Game 7, German-France discard versus Feigned Retreat Jagro. This matchup is going to be absolutely huge. Let us get spectator mode. Yeah, let's get spectator mode open here. And before we get into this game, I will be doing 2 more giveaways, one small regular giveaway and 1 big giveaway, because you know what? What's the point of having big giveaways if you're not giving them away going into a Game 7 of the first series? So here, spectator modes are set up. Let's go over to the giveaway. And the first regular giveaway is going to be going to Kilorama. You have won the giveaway. And now the big, huge giveaway of 300 gold, that's practically an officer pack, will be handed out to none other than Von Malachowski. Von Malachowski, you have won the big giveaway, so make sure your Twitch whispers are open, and I will be sending you that after the game. And now let's tell our players they are ready for Game 7. Here we go. We're getting a little issue with the spectator mode. There we go. And we are going to see Feigned Retreat Jagro, Innocent Bubbles, going second here. Signal Regiment, Key 83. Those are very strong starts. If you keep the Desperate Measures, it means Erratos are guaranteed Feigned Retreats. On the flip side, Berto Burrito has a bit of a slower deck. The U16 is probably not going to be triggering. He knows that. I mean, Innocent Bubbles literally couldn't trigger that if he tried. But the Sunstrike's going to come out. It's not great. That's certainly, like, most units in your opponent's deck dies to Sunstrike, and that's possibly the worst one. But the reason he's going for this is he wants to play the turn 3 autocannon with the greatest possible chance that it survives. Unfortunately, the Type 93 35T is going to mean it is immediately answered. If you're Berto Burrito, you're thinking, well, he doesn't run Audacity. So there's a good chance this survives. It does get traded out, but it gets traded out by a 35T, and you're happy to see the 35T gone. The Nakshub is going to come out, as well as the U16 held up. The Nakshub is going to potentially give credits next turn with the Schutzen coming out. But in the meantime, this is quite a bit of damage coming forward. The Radiant Brigade top deck is going to clear the Nakshub and put another unit into the front line to potentially start getting damage straight into this HQ. And the Type 93 plus Signal Regiment just means Berto Burrito is under so much pressure on the HQ. He's going to take out the Cavalry Regiment. It does have 1 less health, but importantly, it has 1 less operation cost, and that is what he's going to be focusing here, is forcing Innocent Bubbles to play out more credits. The Key 83 comes out. Wolfpack and Schutzen Trade is actually a very good answer here. Again, he's taking a ton of damage, but this is starting to stabilize. It's still not good, but he's starting to stabilize, and Wolfpack discards the key. That is absolutely huge for him. But Aichi pickup, that's going to be a very frustrating card to deal with. There's still no answer to be seen for this, the Signal Regiment. The Desperate Rushers comes out to clear out the Schutzen, and U16 is not triggered, so that's not going to go off here. A second Schutzen pickup is quite solid, can answer the Bicycle Regiment. He can also alternatively trade out with the Whirlwind and go for the 15E. He's going for the Whirlwind, so he's almost certainly going for the Guard follow-up. But again, look at that HQ total. You're not stopping the Aichi. The Signal Regiment is still on board. Type 94, this is going to take out the Guard, but it's also going to trigger the U16. And if this hits Dina, things could be very, very bad for Innocent Bubbles. Like, he looks like he's in a situation where he can't lose, but here comes the surprise attack. It's not even going to be with the double Type 93. It does come out after the Dina, though. It discards the Bicycle Regiment. Now, Type 94 would be the Type 94 TK early, because there is 2 Type 94s in hand, would have been the worst option. Admiral Hibbard top deck is quite big. It's going to stop the Aichi. That's going to stop immediate damage this turn. There's no way to get through the Guy. This denies a credit and a draw. And we're getting ever closer to this Leopold turn. but Leopold will bounce Aichi, and bouncing Aichi will give more draw. As well as if Type 93 gets onto the board, that's going to be additional burst. Berto just needs one good draw here. He needs just some sort of out, something to get past this just immediate loss he's facing down on the board here. The Jaeger Regiment pickup will let him draw a card, and the Schützen clears the board, and this is going to be able to pin the Aichi, and he's not dead on board. But if he pushes up and hits Aichi, he will die from hand to the Signal Regiment, and that's exactly what he does. And this is giving Innocent Bubbles the Game 7 victory if he sees it. He just simply has to trade out his 2 units, play Type 94 from hand, doesn't need Feigned Retreat. He just simply doesn't need it. He says, I don't care if you have a 2/6 guard, I don't care if you have back-to-back Schützens, I don't care if you play the Admiral Hippo, deny the draw, deny the credit, I'm just simply going to burn you out with Signal Regiment, and that is Innocent Bubbles winning this series between him and Berto Burrito, and that is absolutely huge for him starting off this round robin with a victory. But again, even though Innocent Bubbles takes this, this is sort of the best case Berto could have asked for if he were to lose this series, because I'm going to come over here and just going to update my scoreboard really quick. If we come to the scoreboard here, we see here's the scoreboard of our 4 players. And if we refresh this, here's the updated scores. We see there's only a 3-score difference between Innocent Bubbles and Berto Burrito now because of this 4-3 victory. Absolutely huge victory for Innocent Bubbles. He gets on the board early. He now has tiebreakers through head-to-head against Berto Burrito, and of course he's up points rather than negative points, but this could have been so much worse. If Berto Burrito, say, lost 4-0, if he just got absolutely swept, he just stuck on one deck that didn't work over and over and over, he would end with a -4 and give Bubbles a +5, which would be a very, very big lead and difficult to catch up with. Here, if Berto has a good week 2, he can easily bounce back and even potentially lead the group based on the results of the other games. So he's absolutely still in the running. It is only their first game of the series, or their first match of the series, but huge wins coming out here for Innocent Bubbles. Huge wins and amazing plays all around from both players. Like, we saw some crazy plays I didn't expect, plays I didn't even know were possible or even think about. Yeah, that's absolutely awesome. Like, better than I could have possibly expected for the first match here, and going to Game 7. That's perfect. I hope all of y'all have enjoyed it, and you know what? Here we are going to end out the stream with a few more giveaways. Of course, we're going to do a big giveaway here to celebrate Innocent Bubbles' victory. So if we come over here and do a big victory, the big giveaway, 300 gold, is going to Munir Dank. So congratulations, Munir Dank, on the 300 gold giveaway. And if my counting is correct, we have 2 smaller giveaways to do as well. So let's give those out now. I'm going to wait a little bit, give everybody the opportunity to enter the giveaway one last time, !, giveaway, if you haven't entered already. If you have entered, you don't have to type it again. But yeah, absolutely amazing set. Thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in. Let's draw another giveaway. We have Drag Tom winning 150 gold, if I remember correctly. And huge round of applause to the players. In Game 2, I asked them to restart the match because they started early, and they did that, no complaints. So huge round of applause for the players as well for their amazing plays, but also putting up with the delays, of course, and just some of the the difficulties of doing a community-run tournament, and just any tournament in general. It's not always easy, but they stuck through it and gave us some amazing amazing games to watch. And here, let's draw the last giveaway of this stream. Is going to go to Christian063063. So again, everybody, I will be DMing you in the next hour or so after the stream ends. And if we take a look here, this is what we have to expect tomorrow. We have Baron von Glower versus Killswitch. If you do exclamation mark deck lists, those will include their deck lists that we will be seeing tomorrow. And let's see if I still have this picture pulled up. I do. So that game will be tomorrow at 1500 EST. So 3 p.m. EST is going to be earlier than this stream. So if you're European, that's quite good for you. It means you're not going to have to, stay up as late if you want to watch the tournament. And again, if you missed parts of the tournament, it's available on Twitch VODs, but I will also be uploading it to my YouTube channel as quickly as possible. And big thanks to 1939 for supplying the giveaway codes, and big thanks to everybody for making this event awesome, because this is a ton of fun to put on. But it's, in the end, it's the cards community. It's you guys watching, cheering on your favorite players, just celebrating the amazing plays that makes these type of events possible. So with that, we are going to wrap up the stream here. But again, we will be back in less than 24 hours for Baron von Glower versus Killswitch with 10 brand new different decks than the ones we saw here today, and hopefully another 7 games of amazing cards. So with that, thank you very much for watching, everybody, and I will catch all of y'all in the next one.